Hi everybody, it's Melanie from Art Off Center. Welcome to the Clay Club. This is your first lesson, and what we're going to do is we're going to go over tools a little bit and how to deliver the pieces back to us so that we can glaze them for you. With every Clay Club kit that you've gotten picked up contactless, you're going to get a glaze form in every box. And on that form, you're going to have the ability to put your name, your phone number, your name, your piece, and glaze choice on the form. So in the pamphlet that you got delivered to you when you put the order in, you'll have a numbering system in the first page or so of the pamphlet. So please remember to put your initials and a number on each of the pieces on there so that the number on the glaze sheet corresponds to your piece when you drop it back off to us for glazing. And I highly recommend when you have the pieces made and you're ready to bring them back to us, keep them covered with an old garbage bag, a plastic one, to keep them wet so that when you deliver them back, in case they get a little dinged up on their way, a little piece falls off, then we can repair that when the clay is a little bit wetter. It just works to your advantage to bring those back so that they finish drying here at the studio. The more dry the pieces get, the more brittle they are, so it's safer to get them to us more quickly. But if they do dry all the way and you deliver them back and they have a little ding or something, we'll just let you know and we'll try to repair it here before we go on to glazing. Now, in general, we've got these for sale on our website, a little 8-piece pottery set. And what this has in it, tools for you to use on basically any pottery project. Sponge, essential. We've got a metal rib. We've got a wood rib. There's a carving tool, you can see that. A wood knife. Another carving tool called a loop tool. This one's much smaller. A needle tool. And this one you can use for cutting, etc. And in the pottery kits, there's a wire tool. We switch ours out to fishing line. They're a little bit easier on your fingers. But you'll use this to cut clay off your slab. You also should have received a little container of the slip for your particular clay. So try not to mix them up if you've got a couple different clays, because the clays have different shrink rates. They don't fire at the same temperature in some cases, depending on the clay that you get. Just safer to keep them all unique to the piece that you're working on. There's other tools that you can have at home that you probably can use. So I always look for a little wooden bamboo skewer that you use for barbecuing. These are great for poking holes into. You can use these for decorating. Takeout fork. A heavier one's better. You can use that for scoring, for mixing your slip, making textures. I also have some old cookie cutters. Round ones are great for making the bases for pots, mugs, that kind of thing. And good old handy dandy cornstarch. We use cornstarch kind of like flour so things don't stick when you're using like a cookie cutter, for example. I just pour a little bit of cornstarch out on a plate, and I just keep using the cornstarch over and over again. So, we're only using it on clay. So maybe you might want to dedicate a container to cornstarch if you're going to be making lots of little parts and using like some old cookie cutters. If you're going to use stuff like this that you normally use when you're baking, I would recommend putting them in the dishwasher and sanitizing those so that you can use them on food. You don't want to mix, obviously, between clay and cooking. Not a good idea. Okay, now everyone should have received 10 pounds worth of clay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a little bit of clay off the top with my wire tool. So, and you can use just, like I said, plain Jane old fishing line works great. I'm going to put my finger with the wire right underneath like one corner of the clay slab, and I'm going to wrap the wire around. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my finger on one corner, and I'm going to pull the wire tool towards myself, so I can pull a little bit of a slab off. So I've got a little thin slab. One of the first projects that you have in your pamphlet that you got delivered to you via email is a coil pot. So with my slab of clay, I'm going to try to stretch it out a little bit on the tabletop here. I've got canvas on the table. You could use a piece of canvas and staple gun it to a piece of board. You can use a piece of drywall that you tape the edges with duct tape. An old sheet works fine on a piece of wood. You could also use a rolling pin. Again, I would highly recommend that you keep your clay tools separate from the tools you use in your kitchen, or make sure it goes through the dishwasher before you try to use it again on food, of course. But what I'm going to try to do first is I'm going to thin this out a little bit by trying to throw this parallel to the surface to start to thin the slab out. And I can take a roller to it and I can roll it and even that slab out a little bit more. So now it's starting to get closer to 1/4 inch in width. I'm going to smooth the top of my slab, and then I'm going to cut the base for my coiled pot. So I've grabbed my plain Jane little cookie cutter. I'm going to roll it around a little bit in the cornstarch. I'm going to cut a small section, and I'm going to use my needle tool in the pottery kit to cut that base loose. So I've got the bottom of my pot ready to go. I'm just grabbed a little piece of wood to put that on so I can use the wood to turn my piece. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this, push this over to the side for a second. I'm going to get my slip ready. I'm going to get my little fork ready. Full on restaurant grade. And I'm going to grab my needle tool and I'm going to cut some little strips out of here, and I'm going to start to make coils from the slab. Now you don't have to start from a slab, you can just pinch parts of the clay off. And I'm going to roll these up into coils, and I'm going to start my coil pot with this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squish this a little bit in my hands. Start to roll it up. And then I'm going to roll it on the table. Now with coils, the easiest way to keep them round is to just push on them when you're moving forward. So I'm going to roll it forward and back, and when I roll it back, I'm just pulling it back. So pull, roll, and pull. And I've started my first coil. Now, in the clay world, you always have to score and slip things to get them to stick together. Your slip, everyone should have gotten a little bit of slip in your clay kit. It's really just clay and a little bit of water. You can use needle tool, an old toothbrush, anything that's got a bit of an edge to it. And you're going to score the edges where the coil is going to go down first. So I'm going to use the needle tool from the pottery tool kit, and I'm going to mark all the way around my bottom. And you want hash marks, so you want up, down, left, right. And then I'm going to take a little bit of slip from my slip container, and I'm just going to dab it on one side here. Grab my sponge, wipe off my fingers, and now I can start to build my coil pot. I've got one coil ready to go, and I can grab some more here in a second. So I'm going to pinch the coil down onto the surface, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch a little bit right here and get this down and attach it to the bottom. And then I'm going to pinch and turn as I go to get my first coil ring on there. Now my clay is pretty wet, right now. So all I'm going to do is just score it a little bit with my restaurant fork, just a little bit, and then I'm going to push that clay down in that little gap and then start to go up a layer. Same thing, pinching as I go around to get them connected, and I'm going to build that up until I get to a certain height that, you know, if I want to make a cup, then I'm going to make it as tall as like a tumbler. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pinch across both sides to get that coil to attach. I want the coil to integrate into itself. So now I can just use my fingers to get rid of those gaps on the outside. Just smooth them ever so slightly right around the base. I'm going to support it from the inside. Until I have it all smooth together. And there's my first round of coils. I'm going to lift this off my board just a little bit, dry it off, because as it gets wet it sticks down there. You can always put a piece of newspaper print underneath there. Now I'm going to do the same on the inside, so I'm just going to use my thumb. Your hands are your best tool on clay, so I'm going to take a little bit of the clay around the interior of that, and I'm going to push that clay down onto the inner circle, and just use my finger to get it to attach to the bottom. And when I've got my finger inside there, I'm using my finger to smooth it. And it will no longer look like a coiled pot, it's going to look like a little hand-built pot. So as you can see there, I'm getting rid of the seam marks, I'm smoothing them down, and it's starting to look like a little tiny dish at this point. I'm going to grab another coil or two, get them ready to go. Just going to pinch them together, roll them up, and you want them kind of the same thickness, about the width of your small finger, ring finger. That's good enough. Roll up a couple here. And I'm going to get this cup taller and taller each time I put a coil on the top of it. Make sure my bottom's good and attached. All right, now it's ready to go for the next one. Fork, handy dandy fork. We're going to score the top a little bit. Use a little bit of water. I'm just going to dab a little bit of slip on there. Not a lot, just a little. The clay's pretty wet. But there's your glue. That's your clay glue. And then I'm going to start to pinch the next rounds of coils on there. So it doesn't matter where I start. I'm just going to pinch them down, use my thumb on one side and my finger on the other. And I'm going to pinch them right over the bottom, or the coil that's on the top part of the pot. Try to get them attached. And just keep going round and round in circles until I have that attached. And I'm just focusing my attention mainly on the outside to get that coil attached. I'll fix the inside in a second. Just do some light scoring here. Keep going around. Grab my next set of coils. Before I grab the next set of coils, I'm just going to release the bottom from this sticky piece of MDF that I have here. Score the top again. Little light dabs of slip. There's your glue. Dry my finger off a little. Go for it again. And again, I'm just going to use my finger to get that coil attached down. Then after a while, you kind of just get into a rhythm, pinching and turning. I cut a little angle so I can go up to the next level. Put that over here with my scraps. Score marks with my fork, and then just keep going. Okay, I'm just going to push that connection down. Just use my thumb to make the attachment, and then I'll go around the outside again with my finger, and I'm going to smear across that to get rid of those coil marks and just connect those coils all together. But I'm going to support it from the inside because the clay's kind of wet. It's a little floppy. And again, your fingers are always your best tool. You don't always need a toolkit. You can do a lot just with your hands and things that you have around your house or in the garage or in your dad's shop. Wink, wink. Don't tell him you're getting stuff. Okay? Get that connected. I'm going to use the pad of my thumb to get rid of the coil marks on the inside and just integrate those coils in. Alright, so you can see from my coil pot that I'm about 1/4 inch thick there. That's probably about the right thickness that you'll need there. The clay all shrinks, but you don't want it so thick that it takes a long time to dry. But when it's at this thickness, you can actually start to decorate the surface of this. So if you want to smooth it a little bit more, you can just grab your sponge, really wring it out. You want it barely damp. You don't want to slop a lot of water in here. You just kind of want to refine the surface and smooth it. Look a little bit more finished. And I can just use my finger to get rid of any of those marks, get it all smoothed out. And I'm not trying to use too much water. I'm just trying to use a little bit of pressure with my sponge, and I'm supporting the inside of it with my fingers. There we go. It's got a little wet on the bottom there, so I'm just going to release them very gently from here. There you go. Canvas, great for drying. Grab a handy dandy rag. I'm going to dry that back off because I don't want it sticking. I want to be able to change this. And it's about the size of a nice little planter. It's great for little succulents. You can now put a little bit of texture on the outside. And you can do that with pretty much anything at this point. You could grab, you know, some weeds from the garden and you can press them into the sides of the pot. Sorry, I'm just smoothing like crazy on the inside. I'm just trying to support the whole thing. And I can just use my finger to compress the edge down to just get it a little bit refined. So I'll just use a tiny bit of water, not a lot. And use the side of my thumb or my finger and get the edge down. Kind of square it off a little. Refining it as I turn it. It's starting to look pretty finished there. Now, so if I want to decorate it, you know, you can grab pretty much anything. That bamboo skewer that I was talking about earlier, these things are great. Now, if you have really small children, obviously don't use some of these tools. Just modify what you're using at your house. You can use, you know, the end of a plastic fork. So if I want to put a few decorations on the outside, let's say if I want to just draw in like a flower. Draw that in with a bamboo skewer. If I want to put a little bit of texture around that, again, fork. Let me hold this up so you can see it. Turn this sideways, and I can just use my fork to make marks. And this one. And then I can go around the side again. Try to meet those fork marks. Make some little curves. Do this in reverse, and I'll just draw right into the clay. I'm not going through the clay, I'm just in the surface of the clay. Now these little burrs that come up, these little tiny bits of clay that come up as you're drawing on the surface, don't worry about those. Let them dry. So what we can do is we can knock those off later as the piece comes in. The drier it gets, it's easier to knock those bits off, so don't worry about them while you're making the piece. It's something that we can get rid of before we fire the piece. And we can just sand it down with a the green Scotch-Brite scrubbies. Those work really well. But give it time to dry a little bit. Now, make sure if you're going to use this for a planter, for example. So for me, I'm going to put a little tiny succulent in that. So I'm going to grab my loop tool from the pottery set, and I'm just going to go ahead and make that hole with the loop tool right in the bottom. Just keep spinning it and spinning it till I get a hole through there. And there's my hole, so when I turn it into a planter, the water will release from the planter. I'm just going to use my finger to smear that wet clay back down into the bottom. Don't worry, it's soft, it's wet, I can squish it down. But I'm gently holding this planter in my hand so I'm not trying to deform the base. So now I've got one tiny little planter made out of our Steve's white clay. This clay is bright, bright white when it's done. So I can pick a really fun little color for my succulent out of that. It'll be fun. Okay, so the other clay is still pretty wet, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to just squish it together. I want to keep it wet. I'm going to put it back on the top of the clay here in the clay bag. And you don't want air pockets. You want to squish your scraps together. You want all that clay to stay wet together. So I'm just going to use the heel of my hand and push it back down on there. I also keep water bottles around here. So I'm going to spritz the top of this to keep that clay wet and hydrated. I've got just, you know, an old container that's got a spray top on it with just water in there. We've rinsed these out quite a few times. Now I'm going to spray my clay. Give it a spritz. It's all wet and shiny. I've got my scraps squished down on the top, and I'm going to push that plastic down around the clay and seal that up tight so it's ready and still wet for the next project. So make sure that you always close your bags of clay very tightly. Get all the air out of there. Make sure that you close up your slip containers too, and keep those wet. Now if your slip starts to get a little thick, you can just put a little bit of water in it. And you can use that old plastic fork, and you can get your slip a little bit more muddy. This is just clay and water. Your slip, you want it at the consistency of heavy cream, heavy half and half. And if it dries up, just add a little bit more water and stir it up until it's the mucky, muddy mess that it needs to be to glue your pieces together. There you go. And that one's right at the right consistency. All right, I'm going to close that down tight. I'm going to use my water to clean my tools. Now before I'm done though, I'm going to go ahead and put my initials on the bottom, and I'm going to put my number 1 on this one. So I'll take my needle tool or my skewer, and I'll put my initials on there, MS-1. Okay, so we've got our first little tiny coil pot made. We've got it decorated. We've put a small hole in the bottom of that. We're going to turn it into a succulent plant. We've also put our initials and our number 1 on this particular one. So it's ready to come back to Art Off Center in a few days here. Try to keep it wet. You can put it under a shopping bag, a garbage bag. You want to try to return these to us somewhat close to what's called the leather hard stage, where they're still wet. They can be easily fixed in case they get a little dinged going back and forth from your house to us here at the studio. And make sure that your glaze form is filled out. So your name, your piece number right there, and your glaze choice for that piece number. So this comes back with all of your pieces. And then we'll dry them out, get them all glazed for you, and return them to you within, you know, a couple weeks on some of the clays. Some of them take a little bit longer. So enjoy your Clay Club kit. So we'll be sending out a few more templates over the MailChimp system. So have fun. If you have questions, just hit us up on Instagram or Facebook, and we'll answer anything that we have, or you feel free to call us here at the studio, and we'll get you through all this. So hope you're having fun at home, and we'll see you later. Bye.